Hello and welcome to Simon Says Artwork. In this video I'm going to be sharing with you a drawing which I did quite a few years ago, and what I did is I got several reference images and I drew it all in pencil first and then I ended up inking over it, but it's quite a large drawing and it's got loads of different kind of subjects to focus on and trying to mash them all together in order to make some kind of strange compilation image. It's almost like a collage of different thoughts and symbols and iconic representations of either creatures or technology. Anyway, let's get started. Well, this was the stage where I had everything drawn, so you can see all the pencil lines, and I'm starting to ink all of the bits and pieces as carefully as I can. So I know that this time lapse makes it look as though I'm really steaming through all of this, but it was actually very slow and methodical because I wanted all of the lines to be really clean and have the ability to play with the line weight later on if I wanted to. Which I didn't, because I wasn't sure about the finish that I was trying to achieve, so it was more a case of if I needed the option, if I wasn't going to do a black background and I needed the option to create some thicker lines in certain places and try to heighten certain aspects of the depth, then I had that freedom. So the important part to me was that the marks I made indicated the texture. So for the lion, it was wispy hatching lines, and for the octopus it was very intricate little details. For the flower it was getting these graceful angles and really beautiful arcing lines which make up the petals and the shapes, and then everything having its consideration for what that shape is and what the texture should look as though it feels like. And that just means that you're trying to communicate and describe the form by the marks that you make. For the machinery, I really enjoyed just the shapes. So I remember including them because I thought it will make really interesting shapes in the finished image. And I very rarely do things like this type of a drawing. I very rarely complete a finished drawing, so this was one of the early attempts at completing a drawing and trying to put together several reference images in order to inject meaning into a collage of iconic subjects. So I quite like the idea of the female astronaut swimming through space, and then the cables behind. I always enjoy cables and a network of wires, and that was quite a tricky thing to achieve, to try to keep them clean and the same thickness. And it just means that you have to pay especially close attention to where they intersect and overlap, and to care about the clean lines that you're trying to lay down in order to achieve a certain look. Now I must confess, whilst it's becoming just line work, I do think that in hindsight I wish I would have left it as line work and not put black in the background, and you'll see what I mean by the time I finish off the drawing. It's just, I think I just prefer the line work version, and I could have potentially added some black areas of shadow, just really deep shadow, but the amount of black that I include in the drawing and where it was just didn't work as well for me in the end. And at the time I was quite happy with it. I think I was just a bit conflicted with how I felt because it was an achievement finishing it, but it was also not what I was hoping it would be, and I do think it would be more impactful as the line work that you can see at the moment, where I think it's actually quite nice just having lots and lots of lines, certain parts which are clean and certain parts which are really complicated. So these are some of my favourite stages. And then you can see in the top left I start blocking in black into the background. I think this is the reason why some artists have a look at what things will look like digitally before they commit to it physically. I think it's because that way you can weigh up how something will look once you finish it in that way with that style. And I didn't do that. I never do that type of thing. I just go for it and see what happens. And it's, adding depth to certain areas, but as soon as there's lots more black spaces, or, and on the right hand side there's a lot less wires, so there's a lot larger gaps on the centre and the right, so it's not quite as sparing in the shadow puddles, and it just becomes a bit, I don't know, I don't like it as much. I prefer the black and white, not the black and white, sorry, the line version. But that's just my preference, so I'll stop harping on about that now and just say that this was a tricky, time-consuming process. There was no easy aspect to this stage either of the drawing, because you don't want to accidentally go over any of the wires and thin them out. You want to try and be as careful as possible as to stay within the lines. But this was several years ago. I think this was 2016. And there we go, a bit of a jump cut there to a later stage. I don't know what happened to the clip in between, but I think it just becomes a very time-consuming effort. And then this part I quite like, where I'm adding tiny bits of shadow, black shadow in between the crevices of this framework around this cylindrical structure, and I like that. I think that really has a nice effect. So I think that works better than the larger dark areas. Just like the little bits here in the ladder in between the rungs, I think that has a nice effect as well. It's just a bit more subtle. It looks like it was winter when I was doing this, because again I have my fingerless gloves on. And this was when I used to use the greenhouse at the side of my house to use as a studio space. And I'd go in there all hours of the night. I'd have the light on, and I'd have moths come flying in, because there was all cracks on the panes of the greenhouse walls, I suppose, or sides. It was perspex, it wasn't glass. There was glass panels, but it was the perspex that would crack, and then moths would get in. And during the day birds would get in, and I'd have to go in and free the birds because it was too cluttered inside for them to be able to just fly around and get out. I apologise for my overlap of the camera. That was the setup at the time. These days I've now avoided any of these problems of having my head on the peak of a cap or anything get in the way of the camera, but back then I think it was just a learning curve of not knowing where to put the camera in order to avoid things like this. But I thought if I include the inking process to the extent that you can see how long it takes, even if it's time-lapsed, you can still tell it takes a long time to get this type of a drawing done. And it's painstaking work, but that's where the work goes into and what it kind of achieves at the end of the day. So I do think it was worth pushing through, because I learnt a lot from the failures of this drawing just as I did from the successes of it. And the successful stages would be the line work, which I thought was quite nice, and the more subtle black shading on the cylindrical object. Whereas I don't like it on the lion, I don't like it on the satellite at the top, and I think it was just too heavy in certain areas. So I think it's potentially a space station that I've got at the centre and lower right, and if I'm going to add that much shadow, then I need it to be on the outside as well as the inside, and I don't know. It works on the cylindrical object, but not on the on that type of a bar that you can see from the centre right, but that's where it ended up. Okay, that's the drawing done, and as you can see here, it is quite a large piece, and this is the final thing. So we have the space station, we have some other kind of space station-y things. We have a rocket, we have a woman who's flying through space, we have a wildflower, a lion, have different vials which I drew, a spider, a fly, an octopus, and loads of cables and wires. Don't ask me what this means or what it represents, but it's certainly a large drawing that took me quite a while to finish, and I thought because I filmed it, it would be worth sharing with you guys and seeing what you think. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel, ring that notification bell, and I will see you in the next video.